Picture this. You're sitting at home, enjoying a quiet evening with your family. There's a knock at the door. You open it to find imperial guards. They hand you a letter sealed with the emperor's mark. Your heart sinks. You know what this means. Emperor Nero wants to see you, and when Nero wants to see you, people don't usually come back. This is exactly what happened to Paconius Agrippinus in 66 AD. But here's the strange part. When he read that summons, he smiled. His family panicked. His friends begged him to run. But Agrippinus simply said, "Let me go see what task the director has assigned me in the play." Wait, what? A man just received a potential death sentence from the cruelest emperor Rome had ever known, and he's talking about plays and directors? Let me tell you about the man who looked death in the face and laughed. Before we talk about Agrippinus, you need to understand the nightmare that was Nero's Rome. Nero didn't start out as a monster. He began his reign at 17 with good advisors and big promises. For 5 years, things were decent. Then something changed. Maybe it was the power. Maybe it was the madness in his blood. Whatever it was, Nero transformed into something Rome had never seen before. He killed his own mother, Agrippina, stabbed her multiple times after a failed boat accident. When she pulled back her robe and showed him her stomach, she said, "Strike here, for this is what bore Nero." He did. He killed his wife Octavia by having her veins opened in a hot bath. He kicked his pregnant second wife Poppaea to death in a fit of rage. He burned Rome while the city blazed. People said he sang and played his lyre, composing poetry about Troy's destruction. Afterward, he blamed the Christians and had them torn apart by dogs or burned alive as human torches to light his garden parties. If you were rich or respected in Rome, you were in danger. Nero would accuse nobles of conspiracy, confiscate their wealth, and force them to commit suicide. He didn't just want them dead, he wanted their money too. By 66 AD, Rome's elite lived in constant fear. Every knock on the door could be the end. Every summons to the palace might be your last walk. And into this hell, Agrippinus received his invitation. So who was this man? Agrippinus was a Roman senator and a Stoic philosopher, not famous like Seneca, not powerful like the Praetorian Guard, just a man trying to live by his principles in a world gone mad. His father had been executed years earlier, also caught up in imperial politics. Agrippinus knew exactly what happened to people who crossed emperors. He'd watched his own father die for it, but he'd spent years studying Stoic philosophy, not as an academic exercise, not as interesting ideas to discuss at dinner parties. He studied it as a survival manual for staying human in an inhuman world. The Stoics taught something that sounds crazy at first. You can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond. Sounds simple, right? But think about what that really means. Nero could take Agrippinus's money. That was outside his control. Nero could take his freedom. Outside his control. Nero could take his life. Still outside his control. But Nero could not make Agrippinus fear him. He could not make Agrippinus betray his principles. He could not make Agrippinus beg or cry or compromise his character. Those things, those were entirely within Agrippinus's control, and that made him more free than the emperor himself. If you're getting value from this story, hit that subscribe button. We dig deep into ancient wisdom that actually works in real life. No fluff, just powerful stories about real people who faced real darkness and found light. Let's continue. When Agrippinus arrived at Nero's palace, he found himself in a room with other senators. All of them looked terrified. They had good reason to be. Nero had a simple offer for them. Help him destroy some of his enemies, testify against certain men in the Senate, call them traitors, help Nero take their property and their lives. Do this and you'll be rewarded. You'll be safe. You'll be rich. Refuse and, well, nobody wanted to think about that option. One by one, the senators agreed, some enthusiastically, hoping to gain favor, others reluctantly, hands shaking as they signed the documents. But they all agreed, except one. Agrippinus looked at the papers. He looked at Nero, and he said no. Just like that. No. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on marble. Nero stared at him. The other senators stared at him. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Nero leaned forward. "You refuse?" "I refuse," Agrippinus said calmly. "Do you understand what you're saying no to?" "Yes." "Do you understand the consequences?" "I do." Nero's face darkened. This man, this nobody senator, was defying him in front of everyone, making him look weak, making him look like he could be challenged. "I could have you executed," Nero said. And here's where Agrippinus said something that echoes through history. "When did I ever tell you I was immortal? You will do your part, and I will do mine. It is yours to kill, mine to die unafraid, yours to banish, mine to leave without sorrow." Stop and think about that for a second. This man just told the emperor, "You can do whatever you want to my body, but you have no power over my mind. You can't make me afraid. You can't make me regret my choice. You control the external, I control the internal, and in that space, I am free." Let me break this down, because this is where Stoicism becomes practical. Most of us spend our lives trying to control things we can't control. The weather, other people's opinions, whether we get that job, whether someone loves us back, the economy, politics, traffic. And because we can't control these things, we suffer, we stress, we lose sleep. We make ourselves miserable trying to force reality to match our preferences. Agrippinus understood something different. There's a small circle of things you control, and a huge circle of things you don't. Wisdom means knowing the difference. You don't control whether Nero summons you, but you control whether you live in fear of that summons. You don't control whether your business succeeds, but you control how much effort you put in and how you handle failure. You don't control whether people like you, but you control whether you stay true to your values. You don't control whether you get sick, but you control how you face sickness. Once you really understand this, not just intellectually, but deep in your bones, you become unshakable. Because nobody can take away what you actually control. Nero could take Agrippinus's life, but he couldn't take his dignity, his peace, his self-respect, his freedom to choose his attitude, and that drove Nero absolutely crazy. Nero wasn't used to this. People begged him, they groveled, they wept and pleaded and promised anything if he'd spare them. But Agrippinus, he was calm, almost serene, like a man who'd already made peace with whatever came next. The other senators watched in horror. Some probably thought Agrippinus was insane. Others wished they had his courage, but were too terrified to show it. Nero tried threats. Nothing. He tried reasoning with him. Nothing. He reminded Agrippinus of what happened to his father. Agrippinus just nodded, as if to say, "Yes, I know, and I'm still saying no." Finally, Nero made his decision: exile. He would strip Agrippinus of his property and banish him from Rome, send him to some distant island where he'd have nothing. No wealth, no status, no comfort, just rocks and waves and isolation. Surely that would break him. Surely he'd beg to change his answer. When the sentence was announced, the other senators exhaled in relief. At least he wasn't being executed. At least Nero had shown some mercy. But here's what happened next that nobody expected. Agrippinus smiled. When Agrippinus got home, his friends rushed to console him. "This is terrible. You've lost everything. How will you survive? What will you do?" Agrippinus looked confused by their distress. "I'm not upset," he said. "Why would I be upset?" "You've been exiled." "Yes," he said. "That's outside my control, but I can still practice philosophy. I can still be a good person. I can still wake up each day and do what's right. How is that losing everything?" His friends thought he was in shock, but Agrippinus was completely serious. The Stoics had a teaching: external things are indifferent, not because they don't matter at all, but because they don't determine your character or your worth as a human being. Wealth is indifferent. You can be a good person rich or poor. Status is indifferent. You can have integrity as a senator or as an exile. Even life and death are, in a sense, indifferent. What matters is who you are while you're alive, not how long you live. This sounds extreme, and maybe it is. But look at what it did for Agrippinus. While other senators lived in constant fear, he was free. While they woke up every day wondering if this was the day Nero would come for them, Agrippinus slept peacefully. While they compromised their values to save their lives, he kept his integrity intact. Who was really free? The emperor in his palace, paranoid and surrounded by people who hated him? Or the exiled philosopher who owned nothing but his own mind? Drop a comment and let me know. Where in the world are you watching this from? And have you ever had to choose between safety and your principles? Let's build a community of people who value truth over comfort. The historical records about Agrippinus's exile are limited, but we know some things from Epictetus, who wrote about him years later with deep admiration. Agrippinus treated his exile like a philosophical retreat. He continued studying. He continued teaching anyone who would listen. He continued practicing the principles he'd nearly died for. According to Epictetus, Agrippinus would say, "This is not an obstacle to me, but I am still flesh and bone. It's not an obstacle to my will. I can still be a good person. I can still help others. I can still grow wiser." Think about that attitude. He'd lost his wealth, his position, his home, his freedom to move where he wanted. And his response was, "Cool. What can I learn from this? How can I use this?" This is the Stoic practice of turning obstacles into fuel. Marcus Aurelius would later write about it. The obstacle is the way. When life throws something hard at you, you have two choices. One, complain that it shouldn't have happened. Fight reality. Make yourself miserable wishing things were different. Two, accept it happened and ask, what's my move now? How can I respond well to this? What can I learn? How can I grow? Agrippinus chose option 2. Every single time. Now, before you think Stoicism means becoming an emotionless robot, let me clarify something important. The Stoics weren't saying you should never care about anything. They weren't saying wealth and health and relationships don't matter. They were saying, don't stake your peace of mind on things you can't control. Love your family, but know you can't control whether they love you back. Work hard for success, but know you can't control whether you succeed. Take care of your health, but know you can't control whether you get sick. Do your best, then let go of the outcome. This is hard. Maybe the hardest thing we can do as humans. We want guarantees. We want control. We want the universe to give us what we deserve, but the universe doesn't work that way. And fighting that fact only makes us suffer more. Agrippinus didn't fight it. He accepted it. And in accepting it, he found a freedom that even the emperor couldn't touch. Some exile stories have happy endings. The exiled hero returns home, vindicated, welcomed back with honor. That's not what happened here. Agrippinus died in exile. We don't know exactly when or how. He never saw Rome again, never got his property back, never received an apology or recognition that he'd been right. From an external perspective, he lost. But here's the thing, he didn't see it that way, and neither should we. Agrippinus won the only battle that actually mattered, the battle for his own mind. He refused to let fear control him. He refused to betray his values for safety. He refused to let external circumstances determine his internal state. Nero, on the other hand, he died by suicide in 68 AD, just 2 years after exiling Agrippinus. His last words were, "What an artist dies in me." Even at the end, he was worried about his reputation, his legacy, how he'd be remembered. He spent his whole life trying to control everything and everyone around him. He had absolute power, and he was absolutely miserable. Agrippinus had nothing, and he was free. Decades after Agrippinus died, a former slave named Epictetus taught philosophy in Rome. He would tell his students about Agrippinus, holding him up as a model of true Stoic practice. When Agrippinus was told he was being tried in the Senate, Epictetus recounted, he said, "Well, let me go. It's the 5th hour now. His time for exercise and a cold bath, so let's go exercise." After he exercised, someone came and told him he'd been condemned. To exile or death, he asked. To exile. What about my property? Not confiscated. Well, then, let's go to my estate and have lunch there. You see what he did there? He kept his routine, he exercised, he ate lunch. The verdict came, and he just adjusted his plans accordingly. No drama, no panic, no why me or this isn't fair. Just, okay, what's next? That's mastery. That's real strength. Not the ability to control external events, but the ability to maintain your composure, regardless of what external events occur. Okay, you might be thinking, that's inspiring and all, but I'm not facing exile or execution. How does this help me? Fair question. Let me bring this home. Think about the last time you were really stressed. Maybe your boss criticized you unfairly. Maybe someone you trusted betrayed you. Maybe you got sick or injured or fired or dumped. What made it stressful? Not just the event itself, but your thoughts about it. This shouldn't have happened. This is terrible. My life is ruined. I can't handle this. Why me? Those thoughts, that's where the suffering lives. The event is one thing. Your judgment about the event is another. Here's the Stoic practice. Separate fact from judgment. Fact, I got fired. Judgment, this is the worst thing ever and I'll never recover. Fact, my partner left me. Judgment, I'm unlovable and I'll be alone forever. Fact, I got sick. Judgment, my life is over. The facts are outside your control, but the judgments, those are completely within your control. This doesn't mean pretending bad things are good. Getting fired does suck. Loss is real pain. But it means asking, what can I control right now? What's my next move? How can I respond to this in a way that I'll respect myself for later? That's what Agrippinus did. He couldn't control the summons, the trial, the verdict, but he could control his response, and he chose dignity. Remember how Agrippinus described his situation as the director assigning him a role in a play? This is a powerful metaphor. In a play, actors don't choose their roles. You might be cast as a king or a beggar, hero or villain. That's not up to you. But how you play that role, that's entirely up to you. You can play the beggar with dignity or despair. You can play the king with wisdom or tyranny. The role is given, the performance is chosen. Life is the same way. You don't choose your starting point, your family, your genetics, your country, your era. You don't choose many of the things that happen to you, the accidents, the illnesses, the betrayals, the losses, but you choose how you play the hand you're dealt. Agrippinus was cast in the role of senator who defies Nero. He could have played it as coward who saves himself, or victim who rails against injustice. Instead, he played it as philosopher who lives his principles. And 2,000 years later, we're still talking about his performance. What role has life cast you in right now? How are you choosing to play it? Before you go, smash that subscribe button if this story moved you. We're building something special here, a community that values wisdom over noise, character over comfort, truth over convenience. Join us and comment below. What's one principle you refuse to compromise on, no matter what? Let me leave you with one final thought. When Agrippinus received that summons from Nero, he smiled. Not because he was naive, not because he didn't understand the danger, but because he understood something deeper. He understood that the truly dangerous thing wasn't death or exile or loss. The truly dangerous thing was betraying yourself, living in fear, compromising your values, losing your self-respect. Those are the real deaths. Those are the real exiles, being exiled from your own integrity, your own sense of who you are. Agrippinus chose to face external exile rather than internal exile. He chose to lose his property rather than lose himself. And in making that choice, he gained something Nero could never have: true freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing you can't be bought, can't be threatened, can't be broken. The freedom that comes from understanding what's truly yours and what's not. The freedom that comes from accepting what you can't control and mastering what you can. That's the freedom of a Stoic. That's the freedom Agrippinus died with. And that's the freedom available to you right now, today, in whatever circumstances you find yourself. You don't need Nero to summon you to practice this. Every day gives you opportunities. When someone cuts you off in traffic, can you control your response? When you don't get what you think you deserve, can you accept it without bitterness? When life throws something hard at you, can you face it with dignity? When you're tempted to compromise your values for convenience, can you stand firm? These are your summons. These are your tests. These are your moments to be Agrippinus. The stage is set. The director has assigned you a role. The only question is, how will you play it? Choose wisely, because unlike in the theater, this performance matters. This one's real. Stay strong, stay principled, stay free. And remember, they can take everything from you except the one thing that matters most, your choice of how to respond. That's yours. Always has been. Always will be. Now go live like you know it.